Hello, and welcome to the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival, CIFF Speaks, sponsored by Wayside Furniture. I'm Dee Perry, and I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Aaron Spears. And Aaron, we're here to talk about the art and technique of the filmmakers who are part of this festival, but it occurs to me that if it weren't for the work of unsung inventors, there'd be no equipment to make films or record conversations about them or do any of the million things we take for granted daily.
Indeed, Dee. And on today's edition of CIFF Speaks, we will be singing the praises of an inventor and a man who saw challenges as opportunities to create solutions. So I'm talking about the real-life local hero, Garrett A. Morgan, who was the inspiration for the short film The Inventor.
And joining us now is the director and writer of that film, Philip Musey, as well as one of the film's producer, Cabral Clements, and Sandra Morgan, the granddaughter of Garrett Morgan. And thank you all for being with us. And Philip, first question for you is about a director's statement of yours that I saw, where you described starting to work on The Inventor in 2020 as you were trying to find hope in trying times. And I wanted to have you lay out what you were reacting to at that time.
Yes. Thanks for having us on the show, Dee, Aaron, and it's an honor to be with you, Sandra. I guess in starting, I got to say I've thought about your grandfather and his life so much over the past few years, and every day I feel like my appreciation for sort of his vision and sacrifice grows. So thank you for all the work that you do to carry forward his legacy. And I'm just really looking forward to this discussion. So in regards to your question, Dee, I think in 2020, there was just this constant sort of onslaught of images and stories in the news that, among other things, just sort of reinforced the fact that the life of someone who looks like me could be, taken away for at any given moment for a completely senseless reason, right? And in particular, I think the story that deeply affected me was the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, we were the same age. We both lived in suburban Georgia. He was jogging, and I run all the time. So his story just really hit close to home for me, and was quite painful. I mean, obviously, I never experienced the sort of pain that his family experienced when he was taken away, but I felt a lot of pain myself. And I think that pain sort of transformed into shock with the killing of Breonna Taylor less than a month later. And then that shock just turned into disbelief and utter numbness with the murder of George Floyd. So I spent the summer of 2020, much like the rest of us, trying to find something to hold on to. And I found a lot of solace and comfort with friends and family, but I found that I was still having an extremely individual experience, right? I felt quite lonely in my, I guess you could call it, inability to fully grasp or express what these deaths meant to me. And so I think in hindsight, what I was doing by revisiting Garrett's story, which I had written a couple of versions of in years prior, was that I was searching for confirmation that the lives and contributions of Black people in this country have been extraordinarily consequential through the years and continue to be, right? We've overcome and continue to overcome such unspeakable odds. That's exactly what Garrett did 100 years ago when he built multiple businesses despite doubts about his credibility, right? It's what people like Clara Brown did 100 years before Garrett when she became the first Black woman settler in the Colorado Gold Rush. And in large part, I think is what we're doing now. I think we're standing, and I personally feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of these heroes who, at great risk to themselves, made something out of virtually nothing. And in that way, I think telling Garrett's story, retelling Garrett's story, was the thing I needed to hold on to stop from spinning and just to sort of recognize how far we've come and still how much farther we need to go as a country.
Great answer.
Cabral, I wanted to speak with you. I understand you were the one who had kind of the early vision for this project. I was curious, when did you first become aware of Garrett Morgan and what clicked that you wanted to focus in on his story?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And like Philip said, thank you for having us on here. It's very interesting because in the second grade, actually, I got a project on Garrett Morgan. And it was a Black History project. And, I did a lot of research. So I learned about the traffic light, and I learned about the gas mask. But the story of the gas mask, him going inside to save people with his own invention, that it resonated with me for so many years. I mean, second grade, it was 20 years because I'm 28 now. So it resonated with me for so many years. And then around 4 years ago, I reached out to Philip because, like I said, he's the best writer that I know. He detests that. But he's the best writer that I know. And I reached out to him and just asked if he wants to write this story in short form, and then we can see what we can do with it and where we can go from there. And I think just there was multiple versions of the script, but the story of the gas mask is one that I think was super interesting for us. But there's so much more about Garrett Morgan's life and so many more stories to tell. But this was just one part of it that we were able to do in 15 minutes.
And Philip, as Cabral touched on, the film focuses on a brief but significant moment in Garrett Morgan's life. Walk us through what's just happened as your film begins.
Yeah. I will try to do that without giving away too much of the plot. But basically, on July 25th, 1916, Garrett got a call in the middle of the night to go down to the shores of Lake Erie and to bring with him this device that he was calling a breathing hood, a device that he had invented. And the situation was that miners were digging a tunnel underneath Lake Erie. Someone hit a gas pocket. There was an explosion, and subsequently a large fire underground where men were trapped. So to Garrett, this was a chance to prove to the local fire department and to the broader Cleveland community that this invention that he had been, trying to go around and sell to different fire departments, that this invention worked. He was pitching it around, all basically throughout Ohio and parts of the South, and there were serious doubts about whether it worked, because stemming mainly from the fact that he was African American. And so Garrett called his brother Frank in the middle of the night and enlisted him in going down into this pit of smoke and fire. And, they were able to rescue a handful of men. The film itself is set the morning after, when Garrett and Frank are left out of the morning newspapers. And it explores, I guess, the different tensions that Garrett has to navigate in deciding whether or not to keep building this safety hood business.
And Sandra, 6 years ago, you attended the 100th anniversary of the 1916 waterworks tunnel disaster, representing your grandfather. What sort of impact did that event have on you?
Well, thank you, Dee. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for inviting me as well. And it's my real honor and pleasure to be here with Cabral and with Philip. I'm so proud of the work that they've done on this film, and it's extraordinary. And so I'm really excited for others to see it. But back to your question, the event that I went to in 2016, commemorating the centennial of the crib disaster, was a really emotional event for me, if I'm being honest. This is a story that I've lived with my entire life. I know this story inside and out. And I also know the hurt feelings, that were a part of our family story as well. That my grandfather, I won't say that he felt betrayed, but he certainly was disappointed that he was not a part of the recognized team, despite being in the center of the photos above the fold in the newspaper. And so nonetheless, he carried on. He was a man of intense integrity, fortitude, and drive. And he certainly wasn't going to allow anything to get in his way. And so the amazing thing about that event was that we were for the first time in 100 years able to meet family members of the folks that were trapped below ground in those tunnels.
Wow.
And it was gratifying to, number one, see their descendants, but also for them to express their gratitude for my grandfather and for his invention. and to recognize that but for that invention and his willingness to go into those tunnels, they would not exist. And so it was an amazing journey, I think, for all of us, and a very emotional one.
That's a film in and of itself right there. Like that's
just the
that's intense.
ceremony. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Cabral, I wanted to circle back to the idea, again, of the film getting going. Since you and Philip co-produced this film based on an idea you had, you said back to, what did you say, second grade?
Right.
All the way back?
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the challenges? Obviously, you trusted Philip with the writing, as you had already said. What were some of the challenges, though, going from the idea to the actual film, especially production in the age of COVID and everything as well?
Yeah. Like you make any film and there's a host of challenges. And just to get to the point of going into production, I think the biggest challenge was just, money. 4 years ago, Philip and I, we just weren't in position to make this film because we just didn't have the funds to do it. And then a few years later, we condensed the story a bit and made it something that we could produce in 2 days. I know Philip wanted a little bit more time, but I was like, let's try to keep it 2 days. And then when we actually, got in production and got the ball rolling, then more challenges opened up, securing a location that was period appropriate, getting period pieces. Sure. But I think with the team that we brought on, those challenges were, all kind of minute and all solvable. What do you think, Philip?
Well, first of all, Cabral and I have the type of tension between, director and producer where, he'll say, I'll come to him with an idea and he'll say, well, that's great. Well, let's do it for half the price or this is a great ad that I want, or I want 6-foot rails. He's like, well, why don't we do 4-foot rails? And so
producing.
He's a great producer and a great creative partner to work with. And the film was definitely challenging. I feel like I just love the filmmaking process so much that I don't think I really didn't register how hard it was until we were done. I had I think that the night before the second day of filming, I had slept like 3 hours, and because I was just so excited with the way the footage was turning out. And I remember parking in front of the house that we were filming in. I was so tired. I got out of the car and I got the camera equipment out and I turned around and my assistant director's like, Phil, the car's rolling down the street. And I turn around, I'm like, oh no, this is terrible. And so I just put everything on the ground. I hop in I don't know how I was able to do this so quickly, but I got back in the car, put it in park, and that was better than coffee. I was awake for the rest of the day. It was amazing. So
luckily you're a runner, so you could catch the car pretty quickly, I would imagine.
Exactly.
I might have just watched it roll.
Got my morning miles in.
That's funny.
Do you have a particular moment in production that you were the proudest of accomplishing? Like, oh yeah, we got that.
Absolutely. And it's a scene that didn't even make it into the final cut. There was, it just didn't, it ended up not making a ton of sense in context, but there was a scene that we were filming outside at the front of the house, a dialogue scene between two of the characters. And there was I guess someone was getting a roof replaced, a couple blocks down, and it was just so loud. And my unit production manager, Nadine, was able to go and negotiate, a silence truce for 15 minutes. And Cabral and my brother put on these very official looking traffic safety vests and went out into the street and stopped traffic semi illegally for about 10 minutes. But we got the shot. We got 3 different takes of it. So that just goes to show, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, that's so cool. There were a lot of things I liked about this film, not the least of which were the actors, and in particular, Keith Arthur Bolden, who plays Garrett Morgan. He has such charm, but also an intensity that makes you pay attention. And I was curious, both Cabral and Philip, about the casting process. I mean, you said you got this done in only 2 days. How long did it take you to find the people?
I think Philip can talk more towards the entire casting process and the table reads in the era of COVID, but Keith Arthur Bolden was actually my professor at Spelman. I went to Morehouse. And he was a professor, an acting professor at Spelman. I took an acting class over there, and we didn't really stay in touch, but I always knew that, he was an actor. And then a friend of mine who also went to Spelman, I was like, who do you think would be a good actor for this? And her name's Sierra, and she's like, how about Bolden? And I was like, let me reach out to Bolden, and reached out to him, and I think he did a phenomenal job. But Philip can talk more towards the casting of everyone else for sure.
Yeah, Keith was so much fun to work with. My entire cast was so much fun to work with. I think from a casting perspective, as a writer, I tend to be very in tune, and as a viewer of the films as well, I tend to be very in tune with the voice of actors and sort of the rhythm of their sound and speech. And when I was writing, I could really hear the voices of these characters in my imagination. And so the argument between Garrett and his brother is really, really the driving force of the film. It's propulsive, it's difficult, and it's logical, right? Both of them make very good points. And so once I saw Keith's reel, I knew that he was perfect for the role, because I could see that he could deliver on both the propulsiveness and the contemplativeness that I think Garrett's character required.
Yeah.
Casting Frank was a much longer process, because we needed someone who could come at Garrett, in this sort of perpendicular way, but in a style that was still loving. And Cabral actually used the expression early on in reading the script, all Frank wanted was for Garrett to get his flowers. So we looked at several actors and ultimately landed on Armin, who was just tremendous, and who I later found out actually went to Garrett Morgan Elementary School in the Bronx. So that was auspicious. That's cool. Yeah, very auspicious. And casting Mary took a while as well. I mean, we auditioned several actors for her role. And Christina came in like literally towards the tail end. I think we had like two or 3 days left in our backstage audition window. And I cast her immediately because she was perfect. She embodied the sort of essence, I think, of what it takes to be a partner to someone who spends a lot of time dreaming, right? I think she has an authority that keeps Garrett honest and grounded. And lastly, I knew Chris personally. He's a very talented actor, and I asked him to audition, and I felt that the energy that he brought was going to gel really well with Christina, Armin, and Keith.
And could you touch on the table reads that Cabral mentioned?
So we started rehearsing in, I think it must have been March of last year, and the cast didn't meet in person until July 21st, the day before we started film. So we didn't have any in-person rehearsals. And so we're doing all these table reads on Zoom, and I'm just trying to get, I think this is a testament to how talented these actors are. I mean, they brought their A game every time we got on Zoom. And so I was just able to excite them around the character and talk to them about backstory and give them inspiration and things to tap into when it came to, what they were going to use in their personal experiences to tell the story of these characters. So it was, I would prefer to not have to do that again. It would be great to be in a room with people, but we made it work for sure.
Yeah, you sure did.
I just wanted to add to that. I think one thing that Philip did that was very interesting is one of the table reads, he had the actors read for each other. So Mary was reading for Garrett, or is it Claude reading for?
I think we had everyone read for each other.
Yeah, Claude was reading for Frank, and that dynamic, I think, just made the other character just understand where the other one was coming from just so much more. So I think that was a really interesting tool.
Is that maybe a new byproduct in your toolkit then, Philip, going forward? I mean, had you done that previously with other work, or you were like, oh, hey, this was on Zoom this time, but this is going to work in person eventually too?
No, I don't know where that came from. We were on the call. I think people were feeling it maybe a bit tired. It was at the end of the day. And I was like, well, we just need something to get our brains working in a different way. So that was what came to mind.
Nice.
Love it. And Sandra, as I was watching the film, I wondered, about the real man. Was your grandfather still alive as you were growing up? Did you have a chance to have conversations with him?
My grandfather died when I was 18 months old. And so the short answer is no, I didn't have much time with him. However, my father is Garrett Morgan Jr. And the proud flag bearer for my grandfather. He handled all of his business issues. Certainly took care of all of his papers and ephemera and that sort of thing. And I spent a lot of time with my father, and certainly traveling with my father, making sure that pieces and parts were farmed out, for shows or programs or what have you, and also then collected, cataloged, and maintained, and that sort of thing. And I heard many, many, many stories. That the traffic signal. At one point we had the traffic signal and the gas mask at our home. And I took when I was in kindergarten, as an example, I ran out of toys to take for show and tell. And so I asked my dad if we could take the gas mask one day. And my dad called the teacher, of course, and asked if it was okay. And she said yes. And so we came to school with the gas mask and told my grandfather's story. I put the gas mask on and then and played duck, duck, goose, chasing kids around the room with it. And then my father said that's enough and took it back, and that was that. So even though I did not know him personally, I had a very intimate relationship with his memory. And also my grandmother, Mary Hoshek Morgan, lived with us. When my grandfather died, and she was elderly, she was getting up in years. My parents felt it was best for her to come and live with us, so that they could keep an eye on everyone, right? On her and on me too. So that worked out wonderfully, because I learned a lot from my grandmother. Not only about her life with my grandfather, their hopes and their dreams, their tenacity and stick-to-itiveness, but my grandmother was Bohemian, a nice Czechy woman. And I learned all of the things that a good Czechy girl should know as well, sewing and baking and embroidering and everything that was important to, women of her generation, along with those stories. In fact, my grandmother was a big fan of brooches, and in her honor, I am wearing a brooch today. She had many brooches, and it launched my interest in collecting antique and vintage brooches as well.
And it also sounds like you have become the flag bearer for the Morgan family and that legacy.
It feels that way, but I'm proud to do it, because there are so many aspects of our family story that continue to unfold. My grandfather lived the bulk of his life here in Northeast Ohio. And it's only recently, I'm going to say in the past year or so, that we've begun to explore his life in Kentucky. And what his life was like there, and what his parents' lives were like. They were both enslaved, freed, obviously. There is, there seems to be some growing credence to the story that Sidney Morgan, my grandfather's father, my great grandfather, was the offspring of one of the big Confederate soldiers in Kentucky. It's an amazing story. We'd always heard that that he was a part of the Morgan's Raiders family, and we just kind of dismissed it out of hand and thought, whatever. These are like legends that everyone hears, until they reached out to us. And he didn't have any children that lived. And so the story has been that he had no heirs, until someone from the Maddie Reedy Morgan family reached out to us and said, our great great grandmother told us stories about your great grandfather, and the knowledge of him being a son. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. And so we've been down to Kentucky. We visited Hopemont, which was their historic home. And there's a lot to unpack there, and there's a lot to do as well in order to confirm, that story. But we're on that path, and it's pretty amazing. And then to go to Paris, Kentucky, where they recently celebrated Garrett Morgan Day, which was pretty amazing. Which is where he lived, and to see the space where their house was, and where his school, the branch school for colored children, and all of these things that were never a part of our storyline, because again, I didn't know my grandfather well because I was a baby when he passed away, but we never went to Kentucky. No one ever talked about Kentucky. I mean, that was a door that essentially was closed to us. We didn't explore that history or ever go down there. The first time I was in Kentucky, I was 12 years old, and the next time I went to Kentucky, I was a woman of a certain age. So it just, it was never really a part of our storyline, and I'm delighted to be able now to really cross the Ohio River and to begin to explore and tell that story as well, because it's every bit as rich, and really informs my grandfather's attitudes and behaviors, and his tenacity when he was in Ohio. And so in that regard, I am really enjoying carrying this flag and learning more about my family, and in turn about myself.
I wanted to shift over to Philip and then Cabral. I'm going to kind of combine. I got a couple geeky tech questions about the movie for you that I'd love to hear about. The first one would be, or I'm not sure which one of you would want to speak to this, but the production design. You said you shot it in, you said 2 days, and you're on a short film budget. How did you so successfully recreate 1916 as beautifully as you did?
Alexis Claiborne.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah. Expand on that.
Oh, yeah, expand.
I was wondering.
That's the answer. That's it.
All right.
So Alexis, she was the set designer. I've known her since high school. I knew that she did interior design sometimes just as a hobby. But I know her to be just have an extreme sense of detail. She's extremely attentive to detail. So I reached out to her. She's never done set or film design before. And I asked her if this is a project, a challenge that she wanted to take on. And, ultimately she agreed, but how she did it, I think far exceeded my expectations. But at the same time, I wasn't shocked because she came in with literally 3D renderings of the house then put things up of how she wanted everything to look just based off of the pictures that we sent her and the dimensions of the rooms. So I think that was amazing. And like I said, a testament to just her artistry and her attention to detail. And she would, buy things, from thrift stores, and, there's this huge desk that we had to move in there. So it was definitely Alexis Claiborne and her vision for the set design, which I think took a load off of definitely Philip for thinking too much about that. But of course, as the director, he definitely had input on that as well. And the wardrobe, Philip practically sourced himself. So it doesn't say it in there, but I think wardrobe design goes to Philip.
Cool.
Yeah, that was a fun process. But like you said, Aaron, I mean, short film budget, but credit really goes to Alexis, our production designer. She ran with our vision for the time period, I think. And to Cabral's point, the thing that I was given the opportunity to focus on, because that was sort of taken off my plate, was to do a ton of research around the look and feel of just chamber dramas in general, right? How to light them, how to stage them, how can we stay creative despite the restrictions of working in a small space, but use that to our advantage, right?
Yeah.
And I was heavily influenced by Ingmar Bergman's trilogy of faith, especially Winterlight, and sort of how he manages to bring us into the psychology of the main character in such a tight space while keeping the energy and the curiosity high. Creatively, I think when it comes to lighting, I was heavily influenced by Barry Jenkins' If Beale Street Could Talk, which has these heavy and rich glowing lighting schemes. But I also found a ton of inspiration in Steve McQueen's Small Axe series, which makes heavy use of natural light. And I think once we were able to nail down the emotions that we wanted to convey on character on screen, all of the other production elements, the set design, the costuming, the furniture, all came together naturally and just made sense.
So my second geeky tech question, actually, I think you were just speaking to. I know Barry Jenkins has used this a lot. Jonathan Demme, Spike Lee for sure. Characters that directly look into the camera. You do this a couple times in your film, and it's very effective. I love that element. Where did that inspiration come from to shoot that way? Because it's not in every film. It's usually select filmmakers that really pull that off. You do it very well, and it's very engaging. But what went into that, making that choice?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's a risky idea to have any character look into the camera because you run the risk of it coming off unmotivated or ingenuine. And so I felt like it was a risk worth taking. Without spoiling those particular moments, I can say that we ended up actually having more of those direct camera looking moments than I originally had scripted. Funnily enough, my assistant director Cam basically commandeered the camera at the end of shooting when I was nursing my migraine and my sleep deprivation, and he got a few profile shots that we included in the edit, which these shots ended up being some of my favorite shots of the film because this film is because we're limited by the space. It's about the psychology of Garrett Morgan and by extension, I think the psychology of Black entrepreneurship. And so very much trying to create opportunities for the audience to get inside of Garrett's head. And it just so happened that I think Keith and the rest of the cast delivered, the type of performance that warranted trying something like that. So that's how that happened.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Sandra, one last question for you. You've seen the film. Were you involved in any other way besides just watching and appreciating it?
Well, I'll tell you that I did speak with Cabral several times, and I can say that I did not, I don't think that I was much help other than maybe encouragement, because when I heard from these young and very talented men, I was excited by the project and excited that they saw value in my grandfather's story, and particularly the story of the tunnel disaster. I think that if I'm being honest, it's been a few years that we have been going back and forth around this, around this film and around this story. And I felt that this was a great story to tell, or a great story to focus on. And so I was really glad that they chose this story to tell. And I think that they hit all the right buttons, right? I mean, it was bang on. And I think that, even my grandmother's personality, I think that they really captured well, that she was no pincushion, and she was a very determined woman. I just think that they did a fantastic job from the beginning to the end. And I would say that aside from just being encouraging and sharing a few story ideas, they did everything. They did all the heavy lifting. They did all the research. They've done a fantastic job. I'm just immensely thankful and really very proud of this production.
And as well, everyone should be. Finally, Philip and Cabral, I'm curious what you see the purpose of the film as at this point. Is it a calling card to make a larger film about Garrett Morgan, or does it mean something else to you? We'll start with Cabral.
Yeah, definitely that's in our mind. making this into a feature, because like I said, there's so many stories that we can tell, and we can even elongate this story. So making this into a feature or a series, that's definitely on our mind, and it's one of our goals.
Yes. I mean, I think the answer to both of your questions is actually yes. Would love to expand this into a limited series or a feature, with the help of Sandra and the Cleveland community. That would be an amazing next step. I think the second question is a really interesting one, because the film very much is something else to me. I mean, I feel such a personal affinity with Garrett. I think a lot, the two of us have a lot in common, specifically our drive to create. And, as a filmmaker and as an entrepreneur, I actually draw on his example a lot. I mean, to me, he's basically like the patron saint of perseverance. What he accomplished 100 years ago is a reminder to me, and I think should be to anyone of any background, that we're all capable of extraordinary things, and I think we've got to do the work of creating space for other people to do their best work, so that there can be even more Garrett Morgans in the future. And I really hope that with this film, people celebrate his life and reimagine what's possible for their own.
Well said. Thank you all. This was such a great conversation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for having us.
Thank you. My grandfather had a motto that you try to go around something, you go over it, or if nothing else, you go through it. And I think that strategy has been certainly something that we've all lived by, and I think something that you, Philip, and you, Cabral, will benefit from too. So, as extended members of the Morgan clan, I would remind you that any challenge that you face, you can try to go around it, you can try to go over it, but if all else fails, blast right through it.
We've been talking with director, screenwriter Philip Musey, co-producer Cabral Clements, and granddaughter of Garrett A. Morgan, Sandra Morgan, about the short film The Inventor. That film will be screened at CIFF 46 on Friday, April 8th at 12:05 p.m. in the Allen Theater at Playhouse Square as part of Shorts Program 12. Then there will be a Q&A following that program, which includes all of the filmmakers, including those from The Inventor. That'll last till 2 p.m. Following that, Dr. Regina Williams will moderate a conversation about The Inventor, and that happens at about 2:10 p.m. in Idea Center's Gund Studio. You can also find the film as part of CIFF 46 Streams, which runs online from April 10th through the 17th. Find out more about all that's going on at the film festival by logging on to the website clevelandfilm.org. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
And thank you to our sponsor for this podcast, Wayside Furniture, keeping it local since 1937. Also, thank you for listening to CIFF Speaks.